Okay, Dennis C. Boxell. Uh, I have a lot to say about him. He was very, very important in helping me in my folk dance career. Perhaps the most important in what he did to open doors for me. And I'm lucky that I got to meet him early on. What's interesting, people don't realize both Dennis Boxell and Dick Crum came from the same area. They were born and raised in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So there must be something about that area and the kind of quality of dancers and teachers that came out of there. There always has been a long folk dance tradition in the Twin Cities. Maury Gelman was another one who had taught a lot of German dances and had taught at Stockton, was also from there, I understand, had been a mentor for these teachers, Dick and Dennis. But Dennis was very talented, a lot of similarities with Dick. He was a linguist. He had studied at the Army Language School in Monterey. He had been stationed in the Czechoslovakia, which became the Czech Republic now. But he studied in Slavic languages, spoke Serbian and Croatian, or Serbo-Croatian, as we called it then, very well. And on his free time, got to travel in Yugoslavia in the early 60s. And amazing things happened. In 1963, in his life, I mean, he made a wonderful contact with he was approached by the Folkcraft record company in New Jersey, which was kind of the competitor to Folk Dancer records. There was always this duality. Very often, Folk Dancer would come out with a variation of Shetnya, and a month later, Folkcraft had their variation of Shetnya, and people all had their favorite versions. But anyways, Dick was approached by Folkcraft Records, and then at that time, one of their dance consultants was Ricky Holden, another legendary folk dance teacher who had put together several albums. He actually started out as a square dance scholar in Texas, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, the project was asking Dennis to come up with a project of recordings and the dances that went along with these recordings in Yugoslavia, and especially in Macedonia. So in 63, 64, Dennis went over there and with his amazing knowledge of languages and contexts was able to connect with all of the famous dance experts and musicians in Belgrade, Serbia, in Skopje, Macedonia, and Zagreb in Croatia, and got them in studios and recorded this amazing collection that most of which we still use today. They were some 45s and the famous set of LPs of Macedonian folk dances 1, 2, and 3, which were the basis of Atanas Kolarovsky's first teaching tour in America, which Dennis and Ricky Holden put together. And where I met Dennis the first time was in Montreal in 1964, when he came over with Atanas to present a workshop. It was part of the North American tour. And I discovered both, of course, the talents of Dennis as an organizer. He didn't do much teaching then at that time in Montreal, but Atanas, of course, was an amazing discovery. And what followed, to make a long story short, from that first visit to Montreal had a very active Balkan dance community, and many of the people made an offer to Dennis. If he was willing to move to Montreal from California, where he was based at that time, and maybe start a group here, a Balkan performing group, because we had a group, but it no longer existed. And some of the people in that group said, we got to continue. And they felt like Dennis might be the savior to do something. Well, Dennis was kind of crazy and adventurous, said, why not? So he packed his car and put hundreds, I think, of costumes in a big trailer in the back. And he said, Montreal, here I come. And he started or continued the Balkan dance tradition with a group called Slavian, and that's where I joined the group. I was a young kid then. I was only 16. but so enthusiastic and impressed by Dennis's knowledge of the culture there. And I kept picking his brain. I think he thought I was a real pain, asking always questions, so curious. And I was spending all my time at his place in Montreal, looking through his record collection and asking him, how's that guy playing? And what is this dance? But he realized that I was genuinely serious about all this. And then in 1967, things didn't turn out as well as he had hoped in Montreal. And he sort of got a similar offer to move to Seattle, Washington, where there was a bunch of people there anxious to get involved with the new group there. And at that time, Dennis said to me, Yves, if you really want to, you could move to Seattle and continue dancing with me in this new group. And I was just, young and crazy at the time and available. And I did. I took the transcontinental train from Montreal with a big set of bags, and Dennis picked me up in Vancouver, and we drove to Seattle. And I ended up spending a year in Seattle dancing in Dennis's Collida group, which a lot of people remember at that time. It was amazing. We had all these wonderful costumes. We put together a 2-hour show. We danced at the Seattle Opera House. We toured the Seattle schools. And I was right there in the midst of the action. And in 1967, Dennis was invited to teach at Stockton camp. I'm not sure, this was not necessarily his first time, but he said, listen, Yves, if you want to come for free, teachers are entitled at Stockton to have an assistant, either to demonstrate the dance or to help play the record player and so on. He said, would you like to come? So it was hard to say no. So we drove down from Seattle, and I ended up being sort of on staff at Stockton because I was helping Dennis, and I got to meet all of these incredible people. Teachers that were there, and got to meet John Filsich, who was selling his records. But Dennis opened the door for me, and that's really important. And I really want to stress that and pay tribute to Dennis, who helped me to get there, to meet people in California, because from that first contact, I ended up coming back to Montreal soon after the Seattle year I spent there. But the contact had been made at Stockton through Dennis to go to California Folk Colo Festival in 1967 to teach there on my own. Dennis was also on staff, but my name was there, and I told John Filsich, I had just come back from Bulgaria, spending a few months there in 1966, and I told John, I only know 4 or 5 dances I learned there. He says, well, teach those 4 or 5 dances and we'll be happy. But that was just the beginning, and the rest is history. I ended up doing month-long tours up and down the West Coast. And before I knew it, it was all over the place. And I realized I was really making a living from this. In the meantime, I ended up going back to Bulgaria. Dennis Boxell gave me some wonderful contact information, teachers and specialists, choreographers and folklorists he had met on his visit to Bulgaria and Macedonia. And I ended up using a lot of these contacts to help me when I went there later on and spent a year or 2 on my trips. So thank you, Dennis. To me, you are a very important person in my life. I want to pay tribute to you. I also appreciate and recognize your talent as an amazing choreographer. Dennis had an act of using real traditional village dances and putting them on stage in a very, very tasteful way, not over choreographed, yet he insisted on the quality of the dancers, and he did that until his final years. I remember him working a lot in Los Angeles with groups from Serbian community and also the Greek community. So really, he had a very rich life, and his knowledge was just incredible. So I was privileged to have been exposed to all these wonderful people that we're talking about today, Anatol, Dick, and Dennis. And I really pay tribute to them and want you to realize how important all of them were in what they contributed in terms of dance material and teaching quality in North America and elsewhere.